Hi. So yes, it's been an eventful like 2 weeks for me. I was in the ER and then I ended up also going to the urgent care and at least my face is now a normal human person size and my ears are not like balloons. So not my most fun time, but I learned a lot. So anyway, I'm finally to a point where I feel like I'm not like a watermelon person. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, okay, on social media, and I've done a video on like, hey, be careful about gurus before. I also grew up with sort of the whole guru thing back when I was a kid because the community I grew up, the spiritual community I grew up in, really stole quite a lot from like India and Asia. So there was a lot of like that guru template. And so I kind of got like a firsthand look at it, when I was younger in more of like the spiritual context. And then I sort of saw it happening online with social media, especially, I guess it's called like the parasitic relationships. I feel weird about that though, because I've made genuine friends online, like people that I now know in real life. We've been supportive. So I don't think that just because you get to know when someone online first that it is a necessarily a bad situation. But I mean, the parasitic, when you see it, I feel like vibe. So a lot of people going online with explanations of, how you should do things. And I see it a lot around dating. Like, there's a word case study. She's very popular among neurodivergent women, particularly with, autism, because she takes a rhetorical pattern match analysis approach, a linguistic approach to breaking down like these dating profiles and like what are the red flags, and then the phrasing usually is block to burn. As soon as you see this, you just block, you don't even give them a chance. And so a lot of the information I would agree is correct, and not necessarily wrong, but every once in a while, well, more often than that maybe, someone will say, well, okay, what's an example of a good dating profile? And that is a question that is never answered and never responded to. And let me turn this off. I don't understand why. Okay. Um, because it's harder to rule people in than rule people out. You can't create a system to rule people in the same way you can create a system to rule people out. But I don't think that people really understand that. And so so sort of in general, some of my algorithm, like on Instagram, for example, is the social media anthropology, people like explaining like how things are. And so there's a lot of this because everyone is now, we've learned, we've got language, we've got ideas, we've got concepts, red flags, and this is inappropriate behavior, and so now we're paying attention, right? But who are the yeses? So, generally speaking, I often answer that question with paying attention to goodness, paying attention to how people respond to goodness, paying attention to how people respond to value, and that often people will disqualify themselves in the way that they handle that. And I don't just mean dating; I mean jobs, friends, social, just anything really. Um, but people really want a system. They really want a system or a person, like of the perfect system or the perfect person. And I 100% do not agree because I think we've all had enough experiences in life where we've seen how, if you want, like fate, the universe, God, whatever framework you're operating in, or even what's the other one? Oh, it just went from my mind, but there's like a secular one too. Where basically the second you go, aha, this is it. This is how you do this. I figured it out. There's going to be an exception. There's going to be something that comes in that disproves it or comes in the way that you said it couldn't possibly come in. Whatever we're talking about has a sense of humor, in my opinion. And so, people really want there to be a system, and then they want to be able to use that, turn around and use that system to tell other people how to run their lives. And we circle back around to the guru system, where you trust a person to tell you what you should be doing. And we do it because we're looking for people who have information. We're looking for people who can help us. Maybe we're tired of living kind of like the life that we've been living. And we're like, okay, we got to figure this out and make different choices going forward. And so I understand how it happens. But there's a reason why I always, like in my own personal videos, I always point people back to themselves. Regardless of whether or not you think it's intuition or you think it's, let's say, the Holy Spirit or spirit guides or, the ancestor, like whatever model of the universe that you're working with. It could be subconscious pattern recognition, whatever model of the universe that you are working with, that model has to be made from the inside. We take in information and we take in ideas and we consider things, but at the end of the day, we're the ones who've got to make the decision. We're the ones that have to live our lives, right? The other person with their advice, they're not living our lives. And I always find it so strange people want influence like that. Like, do you want someone to just do what you tell them to do? That should make, in my opinion, should make one feel nervous. That's a lot of responsibility, morally speaking. Especially if you're telling people, oh, this is how to never get back into an abusive dynamic. It's like playing whack-a-mole. You come up with the rubric, and someone's going to learn the rubric and then use it against you. That's why there are all these like very feminist. We see that pattern of like feminist guys who end up being abusers or narcissistic abusers, and the women are like, no, but I thought he seemed like we were morally aligned, on our values. I don't understand how this happened, and it's because they learned it to beat those standards. They're hacking people. So if instead we hold ideas very lightly, and think, okay, I'm going to consider it. I'm going to take my time with this. I'm going to see how I feel about it. What direction feels right for me, my situation? Where am I don't know. Usually you have a feeling or a nudge. Even if you're someone who doesn't quite have that interiority where you're recognizing how you feel about stuff, sometimes I know. For example, back when I was applying for jobs, I would apply for a job, and then if I got a response back and they were enthusiastic about moving forward and scheduling an interview, and I immediately felt dread in the pit of my stomach, I was like, oh, I don't want it. Even if I got this job, I don't want it. And I did not, maybe didn't consciously realize it beforehand because I was so busy trying to talk myself into, well, it's a good opportunity and has these pros, etc. But the second I had to make a choice about it, and I recognized I had that like inexplicable dread for some reason, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. And so when we leave room to recognize, that we can be paying attention, we can be spotting the red flags, but that there's an element of moving in this life that is going to be unique to us. Our path is our path. So I think a good example of this would be, some people would say, oh, you should spend your 20s grinding. That way you're going to be in a better place career-wise, life-wise, family-wise in your 30s. You position yourself for success, and then that way when you're older, you don't have to work like that. But there's a person for whom their 20s are their golden time to just relax and enjoy being a young person and not having a lot of responsibilities, and then they get to their 30s and they're like, oh wow, yeah, okay, now I'm gonna buckle down, and then they do that in their 30s. um Not everybody's living the same life, not everybody has the same concept of like what a good life is. So I, as always, when I'm thinking about, okay, paying attention to red flags and then green flags, the other element, and it's the one we hate, is time. Just seeing how things shake out over time, not feeling like you have to make a decision immediately. And I will be honest though, I don't think dating apps algorithm. I actually got married before dating apps really became a thing. I mean, they existed kind of. It was more like you logged into a website. And then back then, people who met that way would like hide the fact that they met that way. So when I got married, dating apps were not like a thing. And then after the marriage was done, and I was like, okay, let me see what life is like now from a dating perspective. I was like, what? What? It is so drastically different. The texting all the time, I finally got a handle on how to deal with that, but that took me some years because I didn't the only person I had texted really on a regular basis like that was my at the time husband. And it's like we didn't text all day because we were going to see each other, and then you wanted stuff to talk about. But for other people, maybe they want to text. Like it's not a judgment. So, coming out, and some people wanted to text a lot and some people didn't. And what's a red flag? And you're going through the profiles, and I would look at them and I'm like, how do these people have these like large friend groups? Like, did I fail in life? Like what? And I didn't. But at the same time, I had to recognize like, I mean, I've had friend groups, but these people that have these like friend outings where they go on, they have like annual trips they take together, and they've been doing it since, I don't know, college or something. That is just a very different thing to me. So I was just like, how do these people have all these friends? Oh my gosh. My friends were always very disparate from each other. It wasn't a group, until I figured out how to make those friends. Anyway, so yeah. So when anyone's ever is giving you advice, we want to run it against like our internal sense of ourself and like what makes sense for us. And it's not gonna be perfect. I think a lot of the reason too why people love having like the perfect system, perfect person approach is because then when something bad happens, you look at them and you go, oh, well, here's where you made the mistake. Don't do this again. And people aren't like that. And I'm not saying I've never done that. I have that response just like anybody else. But that, oh, let's run the bug check. What did you do? You're going to get audited for everything that you've done. What did you do wrong here? And the interesting thing is that idea that if you do everything correctly, nothing bad will happen to you. It's just that is its own kind of fantasy fairy tale that has nothing to do with reality. So it's so interesting because sometimes when you see the stories of people who have had really great success, maybe with relationships or career or something like that, so much of it is like they didn't plan it; it just happened. You could call it luck or coincidence or kismet or whatever, but a lot of it was not in their control. They didn't necessarily make a decision and then execute it. So that knee-jerk response we have to audit somebody on their choices without recognizing that there's a lot that happens around us that creates what we live in, that we don't have control about or don't even think about. And it doesn't take those things into effect. Anyway, I just want to talk about that because again, I kept seeing in the comments for these posts, well, what is the right person? Well, who's the right kind of person I should be dating? What is the right kind of profile? And I was just like, they can't tell you that. All they can tell you is how to disqualify people. They cannot tell you what is the right thing, because that's going to be different for every single person. There is no perfect system. There is no perfect person. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. So I also wanted to talk about letting abusers back in your life. And there's also a catch 22 about this that I wanted to mention. Um, so one of the things that gets tricky about letting abusers back in your life, because it can seem like they're no longer abusers. And so we think the moral thing that we're wrestling with is, oh, has this person changed? I don't want to make a judgment on them that they haven't changed or that they can't change. Um, I'm not saying necessarily that they're an abuser forever. And so people, victims really are trying to be, in my opinion, often good, moral, ethical people. So they're trying to do like the right thing. And sometimes it's that they don't have the opportunity to be abusive. And that's the reason why they're not an abuser. I thought about this a lot because my father, I had conceptualized him as no longer being an abuser, but did I want to bring him into my life? Did I want to give him access to my son, his grandchild? And I realized I was thinking about it from a perspective that he was no longer abusive. And I was like, oh, that's a presupposition that I don't know is true. And in fact, he likely is still abusive. And he just doesn't, he's pushed everyone away that he would be able to leverage that way. And then there's the other thing too, which is like the catch 22 you run into with this, which is, okay, best case scenario, they're no longer an abuser. They are the best grandparent. You're like, I'm going to let them have a relationship with my grandchild. Okay, so now this person who was an abuser is now having an incredible relationship with your child, and you are having to watch it. That's going to be incredibly re-traumatizing. Even in a best case circumstances. Worst case, well, not worst, but one of the worst case circumstances is that they actually use the relationship against with your child to leverage it against you to further abuse you, and that they're doing it on purpose. Or they're just generally a crappy person who's also abusive to your kid. So there's not a win there. There's not a win unless the relationship with you has been repaired, and that this person is demonstrating that they you, respect you as a person, respect you as a parent. For someone to just come in and be like, "Oh, I want access to my grandkids," and if you don't give it to me, you're a bad person, right? That person doesn't respect you. They're trying to prosecute you. They're trying to leverage you into getting what they want at your expense for their benefit. That's still abusive. So in general, sometimes when we think about like abusers and we think, oh, well, they've changed. Well, I mean, maybe, but that doesn't mean that that relationship needs to be established, reestablished. I really appreciate how in the let's go with Abrahamic tradition, it's like, oh no, you get married, you leave your parents' house. And really, it only tells you that you have to like honor your parents. It doesn't say that you have to love it's not like you have to love them. Although you could like fold into that, like the love your enemies bit. But in general, there's no standard Abrahamically, which is the one that I'm working with, obviously, that you are tied to allowing parents to access you when you're an adult. And I actually thought it was really interesting too, because in Rome, like in the olden days, apparently their model of how the relationship should go is that you have to treat it's the father of the house, as if he's like Zeus. He is the god of all gods, and you have to obey him. If you don't obey him, you're breaking the law. Well, imagine how well that went for people. If someone is in a position of power and they're not using that position of power for the benefit of the people over whom they have power, that person is not a person who can be trusted with power. And you can't make a blanket statement like that about human beings, because that's just not how it works. Again, no perfect system, no perfect people. Okay, let's see. Oh, the next thing I wrote was letting abusers back in your mind. Okay, this is one. This is one that's really tricky because I there's a point when you're a victim of abuse where the abuser has so constantly said things to you that you now carry their voice around in your mind. So even though they don't have 24/7 access to you, the avatar of them in your mind does, and is telling you all the things that they have said and would say and will say. And so that live and run free in your head, basically. I realized I had a friend who lived in another time zone. So I realized this because he basically would like, it'd be the end of his day and it would be the beginning of mine. We were like, I don't know, 7 hours apart or something. And so he would start messaging me. And I'm like I've started my day. I'm in the middle of my day. I'm doing my stuff. And I finally said to him, hey, I'm like busy. I don't, I gotta like do stuff. And he was like, "Oh, well, it's like the end of my day, so I've already like done all my stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, but like I need my mind back. I need my mental space to think about all the things I need to do that have nothing to do with you. And it doesn't mean I don't care about you as a person, but like you've taken over my mind because you're constantly messaging me. Like I don't want to think about you like that. And I don't think that's reasonable. I think, your mind is your space to think about, I don't know, yourself and your things you're interested in, and it's not for automatically thinking about another human being. So when someone's texting you so much, or they're treating you like they're entertainment, or they're just, and they want a response, really fast, and it's kind of like, okay, I can't, you need space in your mind for yourself. So I've started thinking about the phone kind of like a portal, if that makes sense. It allows someone who's not in your physical location to essentially be as if they're in your location. And so if someone is stalking you, or if they're sending you messages, or if they're just constantly up 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 in your space, you don't get time to just think about whatever it is you would like to think about. It's always reactive. And I think that's also one way that abusers specifically get so much leverage, because you're constantly in a reactive space to the things that they say to you, the claims that they're making, versus, sometimes you just like your brain, we just need it to wander, think its own little thoughts, kind of doop 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 its way, and then maybe your mind pulls together some things and you come up with a good idea. So much of human creativity or synthesis, comes from unplanned, unimpeded mental space. So anyway, I finally had to like say to this person in this other country, like, I cannot talk to you every day. I cannot talk to you every day, all day throughout my day, because it's not allowing me to do, like, to live my own life and think my own thoughts, and to not have them be always in response to what you're thinking and sending. Um, so, like, I love a meme as much as the next person, but I can't, like, we got to protect our mind, basically. And I figured out that a lot of that has to do with protecting the phone too. So physical access to us, and also our minds. And I think that's where the stalkers, they're leveraging your own mind against you. You never know when they're going to show up. So you think about them all the time, and you're worried about them and the what if. So even if they don't show up for 6 months, you've spent every day of 6 months thinking about this person who's not even around. It's a type of mental leveraging you against yourself. And so anyway, not allowing abusers into a relationship again, and then not allowing them into your mind, not allowing them into your mental space, not allowing them into your physical space, I think is really important. All right. I talked about the catch-22 regarding the kids. Ooh. Okay. A lot of the time when an abuser is a family member, people will say, when victims start to set boundaries with them, people will say like, "Oh, you'll regret blah blah blah." So I had one of these. So I was getting married to my son's father. And I did not want my dad to walk me down the aisle because I essentially raised myself and I raised my brother. And I was like, this just, it didn't feel right to me and it didn't feel real. And so I decided to have my godfather walk me down the aisle. But I still wanted to respect my father. You know, I didn't hate him, I loved and cared about him. So I gave him like a position of honor in the wedding and space to perform something because he was like a violist, like a concert violist. So, you know, something special. And I basically was like, whatever you want to do is fine with me. You know, I want to honor and acknowledge you as my father, but also I was not having him walk me down the aisle. Anyway, the minister that was marrying us at that point, who had been kind of like my childhood, I had known this person my entire childhood, who knew the situation. So I don't understand why she was saying this. She goes, "Oh, you're gonna regret him not walking you down the aisle." I can confidently report. Let's see, when was that? 2006? 21 years later? No. No, I do not regret it. And in fact, I am 100%, 1000% confident I made the correct decision. And in fact, my father threw a little temper tantrum at the wedding and sat in a corner after showing up 3 hours late that we held the wedding for him because he didn't show up on time. And then he decided to have a sad him moment outside. And anyway, like, so she never brought it up to me again, but I think about it. I think about it. I'm like, I don't regret it. I knew what I was doing. And I'm more grown now and I have more experience with abusers now. And I'm even more convinced now that was the correct choice. And in fact, I never should have held the wedding. It was in Florida and all of my guests sweated to kingdom come. And I feel bad about being a bad host. So, anyway, so I've seen this over the years where victims will come to me and say, oh, yeah, so and so told me that I would regret not XYZ, not allowing my parents to have access to my kids or something. And I'm like, I'm not saying never, but I personally have never seen a child victim of abuse actually end up regretting setting a boundary, not allowing an abuser to access their kids. You know, so you'll regret it. It's people want to believe a fantasy about what the abuser is and what the relationship is. And so they try to enforce this socially. And I think she genuinely thought that I would regret it. Nah, I do not. And in fact, I know better now. Now, granted, he hasn't passed away, so I'm not ruling that out. But I don't think so. I don't think that will be an issue. And honestly, if it is, I'll deal with it then. But not allowing this man to have access to my son, not allowing this man to have access to my life, not allowing this man to have access to my mind, to continue the abuse. And in fact, I brought my son to meet him because I figured, you know, at some point he should at least meet his grandfather just to, I don't know, have a visual and like have met him as a person once at least. So I brought him to meet him at like, I think it was 12. So it was a couple years ago. My dad spent the entire time talking about himself and how great he was. Negative interest in my son, in his grandchild. Negative, he was not emotionally moved. He was not interested in asking him any questions. He just basically was like, "Oh, he looks like me when I was a kid," and then was off to the races talking about himself. And I actually don't regret. I don't regret having them meet because sometimes you can't. It's hard to articulate to somebody what a person is like until they meet them. But I feel very confident, like, oh, I made the right choice, making sure that they don't really interact or have a relationship. Again, even if he treated my son, his grandchild, 100% well, you'd never be able to relax and trust it because no repair work was ever done. No one is entitled access to a child. I think that's crazy. Anyway, so that's what I want to say about that. Okay. Do I want to talk about being jealous and bitter? Oh, okay. So sometimes people will kind of ambush you into trying to get you to do something that they want, like do it in public, and then telling you that you're like, oh, you're bitter, you're holding a grudge, or whatever it is, leverage they can find to kind of move you in the direction they want. Um, and so again, it's victims often go into a very reactive place, like, oh no, I've got to prove. I've got to prove I'm not jealous. I've got to prove I'm not bitter. I got to prove I'm not holding a grudge. That still unintentionally puts this other person as the judge, as the jury, as the arbiter of who you are. Still feeling like you have to prove yourself to them. Whereas when we put ourselves in that position, right, we can go, oh, you're being weird right now. I'm not doing this. Right. So your sense of yourself is dependent on what they think or what they're alleging. And in fact, I had someone in the comment section who was like, oh, what was it? She was like, actually, I'm assuming it's a lady. I don't know. But they were like, oh, because this person kept calling me an abuser. And they said, oh, so you're so narcissistic. You're not even taking in anything I said. I said, why? That has nothing to do with me. Literally, this has nothing to do with me. Why would I take this in? You don't know me. You don't know my work. This is nothing. What you are saying has nothing to do with me. Um, and so when you get to that place of like you no longer feel reactive, like you have to prove yourself to this other person. So regardless of whatever the attacks are that they're making, you just go, oh man, that's not a me problem. And so the way that I conceptualize it for people on the subreddit is I've often said like there's that idea of fuck around, find out, that there are consequences for acting that way. But abusers will try and talk you out of those consequences. And they'll try to make you think that having those consequences means that you're jealous or bitter or holding a grudge or whatever. And it's like, no, dog, that's fuck around, find out. You fucked around. Now you're having consequences. You don't like the consequences. So you're trying to argue me out of giving them by holding hostage your opinion of me, which if you had a good opinion of me, you would not have done any of this in the first place. So once you kind of realize like, oh, am I dealing with someone who actually respects me? Is this a person whose opinion legitimately matters? Now, that said, as always, there are caveats. Sometimes you have to kind of move in a strategic way for the social impacts of it all. And so I'm not saying that you never defend yourself. I certainly have. But sometimes you might handle it in a different way, but you're not doing it from a place of reactivity, of like trying to get them to change their mind on you. They're arguing from motivated reasoning. They don't want to change their mind on you. They want what they want, and they want to say whatever it'll take to get you to give it to them. And I remember, oh, this is so embarrassing, y'all. I remember I was in a relationship with my abusive ex, not my son's father, but my abusive ex. And I kept getting back with him because I we would have these conversations. And I finally realized like, oh, I'm trying to change his opinion of me. But the thing was the opinion changed depending on whether or not we were in a relationship or not. So if we were not in a relationship, his opinion of me was good. As soon as we got into a relationship, suddenly he thought I was like the worst. I mean, he wouldn't have put it that way, but suddenly it changed into I was like not a good person. And so I kept thinking, okay, if we like talk about it, then he'll understand. And then he won't think this when we're in the relationship, and then the relationship will work. I was really invested in like kind of figuring out how to get this relationship to work. And then I finally had a moment where I was like, you can't keep getting back into touch with someone because you're trying to convince them that you're a good person when their opinion of themselves requires that you be a bad person. And I was like, "Oh, okay." It's that meme of, like, putting on the clown makeup. I was like, "That's what I'm doing." So, basically, if you end up having this push-pull with a person, and a lot of it has to do with their perception of who you are and whether or not you're a good person, that's where that comes in. Um, Kind of accepting reality that most people are not necessarily going to think about you the way that you would like them to. And also, most people, they're living their own lives. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like the amount that we weight another person's opinion, the people we trust that are safe people, we want to weight that opinion more highly than just random people or someone who is not trustworthy, who is harmful. Because again, a safe person is not interested in harming you, even if they think that you're like a bad person. They're just going to usually remove themselves from the situation. They're not actually trying to come in and force or make. So, I don't usually see a situation, broadly speaking, where worrying about an unsafe person's opinion of you actually is helpful, other than for strategic purposes. All right. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so another thing, I learned this from being with my son. So when my son was little, and I've talked about this in another video, but it fits in here. When my son was little and he'd get really upset, this is really when I started to learn how to differentiate myself from other people and my emotions from other people's emotions. I think I struggled with that beforehand, but there's nothing like having them be so, so, so upset that you like cut the crust off the bread when you shouldn't have, even though you always do, or you cut it in a diagonal and they didn't want the bread cut, or just something where you're like, wait, what is happening? And they're so upset, and they're so upset, and you go, oh, okay, okay. I didn't do anything wrong. He's allowed to be upset. This case, my son. He's allowed to be upset. This is very traumatic for a reason I don't quite understand. And that's okay. I'm going to support him in this feeling, but I'm not going to take it personally. That's bonkers. Like I did everything theoretically correct about the PB&J or whatever it is. And so when we'd have conversations about things when he would get older and he's like, "Oh, I don't want to do blah blah blah." And I would say, "Oh, that's okay. You don't have to want to do it. I just need you to do it." So "Oh, I don't want to get ready for school." Well, no, that's okay. I totally understand that. You don't have to want to. I absolutely you still got to do it though. We got to do it. So when we're dealing with these other people and they're having their big feelings that they think that you should immediately go into reactive mode and fix for them. Oh no, they think something bad about you. I mean, okay, that's they can do that. They can be wrong. That's not a you problem. As long as they're not doing anything that's like defamation, slander, that kind of thing. And then there's steps one could take. You can hire attorney, send a cease and desist, etc. So there's options. As always, though, there are certain mental health disorders where some people can get triggered into going on like war mode, beast mode. So as always, the abuser you're dealing with best. But you can always at least internally recognize, oh, they have this opinion. It's not real, has nothing to do with me. They can have that opinion, they can have that feeling, they can have that emotion. This is not a me problem. You don't feel like you have to fix it because them having that feeling in the first place is often representative of the fact that they're not in touch with reality. You're never going to reason someone into a different perspective if they're not a reasonable person, especially if they are absolutely devoted to thinking you are a bad person. So again, sort of talking about my abusive ex, he had like a bubble. If you were in the bubble, you were now counted in with the things that he considered to be his and often were considered to be bad. But if you were outside the bubble, he might think very positively of you. And so I don't know. I guess I just thought he was like a grumpy old man. And I thought it was cute. Again, I've done a lot of growing. So I thought, oh, he's like a grumpy old man. And what I didn't realize is when I wasn't in the bubble, he thought really great of me. And then as soon as I was in the bubble, he did not. I also ran into this with my mom. As long as we didn't have any interaction and she could brag about me, she talked about me like I was the best person ever. As soon as I was around, though, I was competition and she was jealous and then was saying like things that didn't make sense to me at the time because I didn't understand what was going on. So recognizing when someone thinks well of you or not well of you, and giving yourself some distance from it to recognize, like, is does this need me to do anything? It might not, sometimes we don't like people, and that's okay. We're allowed to not like somebody. So just part of that healing process is realizing like you're still safe if someone doesn't like you. And if you're in an active abuse dynamic, that may not be the case. And so, if all you can do is like carve this knowing inside yourself, but you're not able to act on it, like every little bit helps, and then one day when you're free from it, you get to a point where it's not an emergency, like 4 alarm fire that you feel triggered into reacting like, oh, I got to get this person to like me. Once you're safe, once their opinion doesn't impact you. As always, I recommend getting to that point sooner rather than later. Of course, your own situation best. Okay, let's see. Yeah. Yeah, that was so empowering. Like, oh, they can feel how they want. That has nothing to do with me. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that was it. That's all I want to talk about. I hope everybody has a good weekend. Like as I said, I'm feeling better. My face is a normal human size face now. I'm very much appreciating that. And I hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you next time. If my mouse works, here we go.